First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I know that these are busy times of the year, and this is time away from your families, from what you do on a normal basis. It means a lot to have you out here. The whole intent of this is to try to get as much engagement as we can from the public. Your input and your participation is something that is very, very important to us. So thank you. Thank you very much for coming out. The intent today, and I'll just give you an idea and a rundown as to how this will go today. There will be a presentation in terms of some information, and our consultant, Cooper Robertson, in the persons of Mike Aziz and Betsy Stoll, who are the principal. They're the two principals who we've been working very closely with now for months. And Mike will introduce some of the other staff here so that if you have questions, Kristen amongst them, if you have questions, you'll be able to approach them in terms of what they do and see if they can answer any of your questions. I'll be here as well, obviously, to answer any questions you might have. But the format today will be a presentation. We'll then do some survey, take some survey information, and that'll be followed up with the different boards that you see around the room. So with that, I'll let them get this thing started, and we'll start with the presentation. And again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mika. Thank you, Mika. Okay, everyone hear me okay? No? Is that better? Is that better? Can I get a thumbs up from the back? Yeah? Okay, great. It's great to see all of you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy midweek schedules. Again, my name is Mike Aziz. I'm an architect and partner with Cooper Robertson. We are the planning firm that's leading this master plan. I've met many of you over the last several months. It's great to see some new faces here as well. We have been very busy as a team, working with the town, working with our technical assistance committee, our focus groups in the board to develop some exciting ideas to share back with you this evening. So what you'll be seeing this evening are your ideas and your input that you've provided to us from the beginning of this project, incorporated in some planning tests, some site plan tests. You may have taken some time earlier when you arrived to look in the back of the room. You see them displayed on the boards. We'll have an opportunity at the end of this meeting to go back in there and look at them with you and have some discussions about what you see. The agenda is really in three parts. There'll be a presentation. We'll go about 40 minutes, share with you what we've learned, and show you some of the ideas that have been developed from that. And then we'll do a brief survey, which we'll ask you to use your smartphones for. We do have a few paper copies if you don't have a phone handy. And then we'll break out into smaller groups in the back for discussion. Joining me in the presentation and discussion tonight, Betsy Stoll, an architect with Cooper Robertson, Kristen Mitchell, a landscape architect with Langen. In the back, I see Katie from Langen, waving. Dove and Laura from Newman Architects as well. They're part of our team, so you'll get to know them later in the session. So let's get started. So this is what we'll be covering tonight. Just a quick snapshot of where we are in the overall schedule. We're still on track to wrap up the master plan before the end of the school year. That was the goal. And you can see we've been quite busy on meeting with lots of folks, the groups involved in this project, from the TAP, focus groups, neighborhood stakeholder groups, etc. And here's our dashboard of that engagement. You can see at the top that we passed the 10,000 mark in the number of emails that many of you, I'm sure, and your fellow residents of Woodbridge have opened from the town and read with information related to the master plan here. Our individual points of engagement, which include all of the meetings that I described, the open house, etc., we've been able to have over 1,000 points of engagement with residents of the community. And we're continuing to go along with our Board of Selectmen monthly reports, TAC meetings. We've been able to meet many of the abutting neighbors and have one-on-one conversations with them as well. As we wrapped up March, we had a busy month of meetings, and we're kicking off April here with an open house. And then we'll be back with the Board of Selectmen next Wednesday. So maybe pencil that in. There'll be another update with some new content then. So we'll start with some of the things that we've learned about this process, just to get everyone up to speed and understand what were some of the concepts and ideas that went into the site plan testing that we'll be sharing with you tonight. So when we take a step back and try to summarize what we've learned from the community about their priorities for this plan, what they desire to see, what their interests are. What we see is a widespread desire for a responsible balance of uses. But within that, most of the site remaining green space with a mix of passive and recreation uses. Lots of things that have been explored in past planning efforts here, but it's clearly a priority for this plan. Within that, there is also strong support for limited development that meet specific community needs and also offset the cost of maintaining the site, enhancing the site in the long term. We'll talk more about that later. Within that limited development, there's broad interest in exploring housing, and that would include senior housing, affordable workforce housing, and potentially even hospitality as a complementary use. The planning context here is really important. We took a look at the regional demographics. We know that the town is projected to see a rise in the younger, larger family demographic over the coming years, but within that, keep a relatively consistent overall population. So that's an important planning context when we think about the types of uses on the site and within the town more broadly. When we look at the physical characteristics of the site, there's several layers to the landscape, to the environmental conditions on the site. And we started to peel those back and try to understand where they exist and how they can inform the plan. So there are currently about 18% land cover of the site that has some regulatory constraints. And for this site, that's mainly related to wetland and water-related regulatory constraints. And that's mostly on the western and southwestern portions of the site along Johnson Road. There are an additional 50% of landscape features on the site that we consider sensitive, but they're not regulated as such. Things like wooded areas of the site or steep sloped areas of the site. Together, they add up to about 100 acres. And about 100 acres, when you see the different site plans in the back of the room, that's the amount of area the minimum amount of area that we are setting aside for green space. So those things do relate pretty closely. The unencumbered areas largely exist on Ansonia Road and the former clubhouse area site in the southeast corner on Woodfield. The site is served by a private water pump system and sewer access. The zoning today does not support the full range of uses that we're talking about this evening, including hospitality, community facilities, and to some degree. So there'll have to be some zoning actions to consider moving forward. There was one note on the sensitive landscape that I thought was worth pointing out too. There's about a quarter of the site that is covered by prime farmland. I just wanted to clarify the definition of prime farmland soils for folks. Prime farmland soils, that's a non-regulated land use classification that's put forward by the state. It's done at a relatively low fidelity, but it is very important. It does have limitations because of the way it's mapped for fine-grained planning. In fact, the state doesn't recommend it's used for regulatory or site planning decisions, but given how important it is in the relationship to Woodbridge agricultural heritage, we have really try to be careful about where the uses are on the site relative to farming soils. And you'll start to see that come up in our site planning concepts. And we can talk more about that in the back of the room over the maps. We polled the community over the course of a few months here on their interest and desires for different uses on the site. And you can see those represented in some of these summary maps. These were just the initial surveys. They showed strong interest across 4 land use areas: recreation, housing, commercial, and natural areas. And of course, trails that would connect through all of those. So that served as a foundation for some of our initial testing. Within recreation, we thought it's helpful to talk a little bit more about the individual uses, because it's a very broad category covering everything from passive and outdoor recreation to active and potentially indoor recreation. These are the list of some of the programs that have been brought up. They represent a range of possible programs. Some of them have very different upfront costs, and some of them have potential revenue generation that needs to be considered for the town. And in the site plans we'll share with you tonight, you'll actually be able to rank and vote your interest in some of these individually. Our process of due diligence also included a market assessment. And that assessment looked at the broader New Haven region and identified 2 areas of strong potential within the greater New Haven market: multifamily market rate and potentially affordable, and multifamily senior living. These, we think, would all be focused on smaller unit types, 2 families, homes, cottages, things that fill the affordability gaps that we see in the market today. The market potential then is followed by moderate potential for single family, hospitality, and what is often referred to as experiential retail. So something akin to a brewery or an agricultural tourism type use, as opposed to some conventional retail that you might see in your business district today. So those are the uses that have come up as most viable today based on our market assessments. When we look at the site itself and try to read the features based on that landscape and environmental analysis, it begins to suggest certain ways of approaching the land uses in different areas. So the sensitive features that we talked about in the lower, wetter areas of the site in the southwest are bookended by higher, more wooded areas in the northeast corner of the site along Woodfield. The previously developed areas and unconstrained areas are in Sonia and Woodfield, as I remarked earlier. And then Johnson Road really has 2 zones. They're very different. One along directly abutting Johnson Road that has a water course and is constrained by those regulatory impacts I spoke about earlier. But just to the right of that is a long, relatively flat former fairway that offers potential for some programming. And in the center of the site, as the topography rises, you have a quite open landscape and a plateau at the top where you have other options for recreation and more passive uses.
It's a little challenging for people in the back to hear. And obviously, I can't say something so you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll try to speak up for folks in the back. Guiding principles are an important part of any long-term master plan like this, and we've begun to develop those and work them through with the board and our other committees that are involved in the planning. These are the kind of 4 basic tenets that we're using for a few different things in the master plan process. One, they help assist in the evaluation of alternatives. We kind of use this as a measure to see how successfully we're fulfilling the goals with the different site plan tests. By their nature being broad-ranging and covering a whole range of topics, they ensure that we have inclusive values built into this plan. They represent a diversity of interests and opinions. And in the long term, they allow for a plan to remain adaptable and relevant over time. As conditions change, as decisions need to be revisited down the road after the master plan, you can always come back to these values to try to understand the best and most appropriate path forward. There are a series of sub-principles under each one, and I won't read all of them, but I'll summarize kind of the major themes and directions from each. So the first principle, pursue sustainability at the highest level, addresses the enhancement of sensitive landscapes, long-term ecological health, climate mitigation, and the importance of low-impact development and land uses. Thoughtful and contextual design, the second principle here. That addresses the distinctive character and charm of Woodbridge, the desire for that distinctive character to endure through the future of this property. The reflection of Woodbridge's rich agricultural heritage. This site as a former agricultural destination itself. And the importance of alignment with planning goals at the local level and the state level, things like the Woodbridge and the state POCD, the Greenway Plan, just to name a few. The third principle really talks about the types of uses on the site and the desire for those uses to support community needs and well-being in a very broad manner. So that speaks to finding a mix of uses that is both environmentally and economically viable. And that's really that's at the heart of the planning process, is trying to balance the uses so those things can be achieved, while still serving a broad range of community needs, which would include green space, recreation, development, etc. Within the recreation and cultural opportunities, the real desire to provide a diversity of uses for multi-generational users and provide spaces that are really flexible, that can serve you in the long term. Prioritizing access to the site with public transportation where appropriate, connections to trails that go further out into town and off-site destinations, or just tying it into the community in all ways possible. And finally, promoting economic and fiscal responsibility. Acknowledging the plan needs to be phased in a responsible way, generate long-term benefits without overburdening taxpayers at Woodbridge, and identifying opportunities to offset direct public investment with grants, partnerships, in other ways to create a balanced and fiscally responsible path forward. So these are the principles that we come back to as a team and in our discussions, and we consult. And how well are we fulfilling what we've set out as the most important goals? So I'll pivot now to begin to talk about some of the site plan. Picking up where we left off with the board last, we presented this kind of framework, this way of organizing our thinking about the site around three areas. One, preserve. When we talk about preserve, we're not using that in a legal manner or suggesting legal status to it, but the envisioned uses here that we'll describe may allow such restrictions to occur if desired. So preserve is a passive recreation. It's low impact recreation, supporting buildings and structures that allow residents and visitors to come out and really envelop themselves in the beautiful nature and landscape of the area. It could potentially include conservation easements as well, but you see pictured here ideas about things like a community orchard or berry patch, access to the pond, the trails obviously, perhaps even a small nature center that could provide programming for students and community groups. So that's one type of area that we began using as an organizational strategy for the site. The second is the idea of a zone of enhancement. And that zone of enhancement would be more appropriate for active recreation. Community and recreation-focused uses that may also have supporting building structures. So if associated with a pool or with a multi-purpose field, it may have bathroom facilities, restrooms, concessions, small things to support a primarily recreation-focused program. And then the third area that we put forward for organizing is transform. So this would be what's referred to as development or controlled development, some of our other language, that would be clustered on the site so it's not sprawling, and it's as sustainable as possible. And it too would include some open spaces and green spaces, but they would be in service of some of the development. And you see within that some of the things we'll be discussing: housing, hospitality, and in some of those more commercial uses. Those three areas are what we used to develop some initial site plan tests. So these were the first step in developing what you see in the back of the room. We developed a range of options, and through discussions with the board, 6 were brought forward here for further discussion. All of them show at least 100 acres of the site in the preserve category, and then there's varying degrees of transportation, transform and enhancement. But those are primarily along Woodfield and Ansonia, and that has stayed consistent, and that's carried forward through our site plan tests. So I'll just share quickly just a few details about the feedback we did get from the board and from our technical assistance committee before we dive into the site plans. So again, I won't read all of these. Of course, this presentation will be posted online. We encourage you all to spend some time with it, but I'll point out some of the highlights. When we shared some of this initial planning concepts with our TAC group, they provided some really helpful feedback that have helped us develop these site plans in more detail and to be able to communicate them more effectively. So some things that were included were be very particular about our use of language around the landscape spaces, how we refer to them as open space or green space or landscape. We want to be able to communicate in using terminology that you all understand and be able to relate to. Species. We know that while there have not been any documented endangered species on the site per the latest regulatory reports put out by DEEP and others, that many in the community have reported seeing some on the site. We want to make sure that that knowledge is built into the plan and referenced appropriately. There was a very important point to point out opportunities for potential easements in the future. Of course, that will be part of discussions moving forward with the board amongst many other things. Continuing on some of the other points that were brought up, the TAC pointed out the need to start to discuss cost benefit of these investments for town residents. That there is a cost to doing anything and nothing on the site as well. You need to maintain the site, you need to make it safe, and at some level you need to enhance the landscape. So being very clear about how we communicate that to the board as we move through decision making and try to understand financial impacts. And also exploring and discussing the different development agreements that could help bring a plan like this to light if there were private commercial or developers that were brought into the mix, looking at sale versus lease, development agreements, entitlement restrictions. All those things will be things brought forward for discussion as we near the end of the project. The feedback from the board was very clear for us and gave us direction on how to move forward with our site plan testing. And I'll summarize that for you here. Again, this was feedback on those initial set of preserve, transform, and enhance plans. All of the selectmen emphasize preservation and/or conservation as a key focus of the plan. All of the selectmen were open to or in favor of development of either a boutique hotel or housing along Woodfield in previously developed areas. Nearly all the selectmen were in favor of considering development of housing along Ansonia Road, with several suggesting senior housing would be appropriate in this location. Nearly all the selectmen were interested in including some active recreation opportunities on the property. And again, cost benefit was identified as a key component of the process. And so how they identified plans that they most preferred for further exploration of the A, B, and C. 3 identified option A, which had development and enhancement at Woodfield, and enhancement at Woodfield and Johnson. 4, option B, which added a bit more transform onto the Ansonia Road frontage. And 3 for option C, which had the same mix, but just in larger areas. So that's in fact what we carried forward. And I'll hand it over here in a second to my colleague Betsy to walk us through them. But just a word on what these are and what they aren't first. Excuse me. These are explorations, and we should treat them as such. These aren't final decisions. They are testing the fit and program layout of these various uses that we've heard them from the community or desired or they're interested in. And they, I think, do a very good job of identifying the land use trade-offs of providing for some uses while not providing for others. And they're simply a starting point for that cost-benefit analysis that we've heard from our project partners are very important. What they're not is elimination of any future choices or alternatives. We're very happy to pick things back up off the cutting room floor and put them back into discussion. So they are also not explicit about potential cost or revenue. That is for future steps in this process. So just a note about looking forward. This has been a helpful analogy for our team on the project so far. We would consider this master plan not to be a strictly prescriptive document that says this use at this density with this building foot goes exactly here and such. This is the green space program here and such. We think of it more of a, what we call a bento box approach, where the site would be divided up into different areas. Each one of those areas would have a preferred use that the town has determined as most viable and appropriate from an environmental and economic point of view through this process with the community and with its leadership. And that would be what is pursued after the conclusion of the master plan. But there would also be alternative uses that would be put forward in this plan if the pursuit of that preferred use did not come to fruition. So it's a very flexible plan in that manner. And it is really the most appropriate approach for a project at this point of maturation that you've studied for this long as a community for so many years, and you really need to set off into a direction of implementation, an implementation that's going to be feasible and support all your needs. So this text is probably pretty small for folks in the back, but again, bear with me, you'll have a chance to look at it in the future, or we can come back to anything after the meeting. The site plan tests are based on some basic assumptions. I won't go through all of these for the interest of time, but trails, we're considering both internally to the site, but also connecting outwards, and they'd be varying sizes and would accommodate different types of users, not just pedestrians, but bikes and emergency and maintenance access where needed. The multi-purpose field we're assuming would be grass, recreational in nature. The community pool that we're testing would be similar to the pool that you once had, but we'll also look at an indoor option. The idea of an ice rink has come up. We've talked about indoor and outdoor. We'll show you both of those. That indoor could be convertible to roller rink in the summer, or outdoor with a splash pad in the summer. And then recreation facilities, which would have a range of different indoor courts and other options for how they're programmed. For hospitality, we're looking at a boutique inn, something on the smaller end of about 40 rooms. It could have an associated restaurant or brewery or spa. Outdoor gardens, gathering spaces, something pictured as in the bottom two pictures here. The housing, when we talk about senior housing, we're beginning to test clustered housing that's about 1,800 to 2,000 square feet per unit, including the garage, and in increments of about 30 units per phase. The multifamily units, a little bit of a range there as well, from studios to 2 bedrooms, about 40 to 90 units per phase, 2 to 3 stories preferable there. So these are this is the basis of design. We needed some guardrails to do our testing and wanted to be really clear about what those were. And just some images of what some of the housing could look like with those metrics. 2 stories, clusters of townhomes, multifamily, triplex. Some of the hospitality images and associated program, generous outdoor spaces that could really take advantage of the location, and a range of different recreation options. So, to talk a little bit more about the landscape, I'll hand it over to Kristen now. Thank you.
Okay. And then you just have to pass it. Oh. This is a good bit. Yeah, this one. Not that. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay. So trails. There was a clear interest. At the last open house, I had so many great conversations about how their children have learned during the pandemic to ride their bikes on these trails. The great use that these are used every day by all the residents. So trails are integrated into every concept, as you will see throughout the room, and then the concepts that Betsy is about to present. We're looking at enhancements for those trails, studying those enhancements, and then creating more looping trails, continuous trails that are centered around some of the restoration that I'll show you in a second. Here, we're looking at options and opportunities. Right now, there are some trails, varying levels of disrepair for the trails, so we're going to propose several options for what those trails could look like and be enhanced. We read through there's been several studies in the recent years. Most recently, the 2024, this is just a snapshot on the right from the Southwest Conservation District concepts. So this is a great detailed study related to restoration and ecological enhancements. So this one has pond restoration, if you can see on the right side, riparian restoration on the left, and then opportunity for a pollinator pathway towards the southern portion of the site. We completely aligned as we were reading through the report. We were seeing, as we walked through the site, many opportunities for those enhancements. I just want to focus on the pollinator pathway, which was in that southern portion of the site. You'll see in each of these options, we integrated those restoration ideas, the pollinator pathways. We're thinking this is an opportunity, and maybe a starting point in this one location. It would be converting the fairway, what was the previous fairway, into this pollinator pathway. So I just wanted to share the image on the far left is just a project in Windsor, Connecticut that was cleared and then drill seeded. In less than a year, you're seeing this great establishment. There's some maintenance over time, but you really see that enhancement pretty quickly. So turning that fairway into this opportunity here for this meadow garden, integrating interpretive signage. Again, this is in every single option in that 100 acres. Turn it back over to me.
I'll just make a quick note. We talked about cost-benefit analysis a few times. Some considerations to keep in mind as we start to think about the site plan options. We have to consider that there's different types of contributions that'll be made for the site, the investments. There's the public and potentially the private, or project partners. The town may provide incentives such as green space, restoration, enhancement, infrastructure investments, remediation to improve the site and attract other investment in it. This plan is going to need to balance that public investment and potential revenue or partnership support in appropriate measure to meet the goals and expectations. And that's something we want to all keep in mind. The other thing to think about is upfront investment versus long-term gains. And that's just not monetary, but those site improvements that you make in the green space or access and utilities are going to require initial investment. And while that cost is immediate, the gains, environmental gains, or community benefits, and maybe even revenue, accrue over time. So we really want to take the long view, and that's the nature of master planning. And there'll also be fixed costs and variable costs. So some costs, like greenscape improvements or construction, are one-time expenses, fixed, but the maintenance, town services are ongoing variable costs, and we need to balance that against what the budget expectations are or revenue streams that we may need to consider here. And we've begun to think about, with those programs, the list of programs that have shown up as as the highest of interest, what the potential costs would be and revenue as they escalate from smallest to largest. This will all be developed in more detail in order of magnitude cost profiles for the Board of Selectmen. So again, just a plug to stay involved in the process as we get more detail and apply to the site plan. I'll hand it over to Betsy.
Returning to our existing conditions plan for a moment, I just wanted to touch on a couple of key details about the existing space. First, on Woodfield Road, some areas that we know are important to all of you to remediate over time. There are areas requiring environmental remediation, particularly in the maintenance area of the former club. There's the shuttered clubhouse itself, the abandoned tennis courts and pool sites, concrete pads of former buildings, and then the parking lot still stands today. At Johnson Road, there's the new parking lot. And then throughout, there are cart paths that are serving as a great trail system at the moment, but are in varying levels of disrepair and in need of constant maintenance. The landscape, although it does need maintenance and culling of invasive species, is in process of returning to a more natural state, which is supporting wildlife on the site, as many of you have noted. And then there are leftover structures like the netting at the driving range, all of which in a long-term plan need to be addressed. So beginning to look at site planning options going forward, I'll note that all of these are based on the identified choices that came out of our process with the Board of Selectmen, with input from the open house, the analysis done of the site, and our focus groups and TAC members. The first, which we call Alternative A here, is based on the initial Alternative A from the previous set of diagrams that Mike shared with you. It focuses a modest amount of development at Woodfield Road. What we're showing here is 10, what we're calling triplex units, which means there are 3 attached small houses in each of the little buildings you see drawn on the site for a total of 30 units of housing. We've drawn these at a somewhat generic size that would be able to work as a small market rate house, affordable housing, or senior housing. Then next to that, there's a small area of active recreation, which is pretty much occupying the space of the former clubhouse itself. So what we're showing there, that's the little multicolored squares that you see down at the bottom of the site. Tennis courts, basketball court, an outdoor pool with a small pool pavilion, and some pickleball courts. And then in this particular scheme, up on the northwest corner, the existing new parking lot remains. And then we're just showing one multi-purpose recreational field. The kind of dark green zones are the landscape restoration zones that Kristen referred to earlier, and those you'll see are included in each of these proposed options for the site. I'll note that all of these have a minimum of 100 acres of natural green space shown in them. Next, this is alternative B1. Please bear with me because I'm going to show you a series of variations. These are what we call test fits. None of them are final, but they're ways of looking at how you could kind of partition the site for different types of uses going forward. And that's why it's important to kind of show you the full range of possibilities that we looked at, all keeping the 100 acres minimum of natural green space. So this is alternative B1. It goes to a higher level of density in housing along Woodfield Road, which is essentially the same type of units I showed you in the previous slide, but then adding one multifamily building, which would have 2 stories of apartments with parking underneath. And that parking could be sort of tucked into the natural slope of the landscape there, so it would be very unobtrusive. And that gives you about 50 units of housing in that one building, and then the more spread out triplex units. Adjacent to that, we have shown the same kind of concentrated area of active recreation that was shown in the previous slide. And then on the north side, along Ansonia Road, we're showing a very modest amount of housing set back behind the existing tree line. So there would be an interior road with housing just on the north side of it. And there we're just showing 31 units. And based on the feedback we've received thus far, we've suggested that that would be senior housing. As I said, the sizes that we're showing right now are generic to be able to accommodate different options where it could be senior housing, general housing. We could swap Woodfield and Ansonia. So these are, again, early test fits. And then on the northwest corner, again, we have a parking lot and the one multi-purpose rec field. Alternative B2. This one tests the same thing on Ansonia Road. Oh, I'm sorry. Same thing on Ansonia Road. And then on the Woodfield side, we looked at what was described earlier, a kind of hospitality zone, which would include a restaurant, a small boutique inn, about 40 rooms, and then some outbuildings that could be a spa, an event space for weddings or other functions. And these are kind of spread out in the landscape. They would take advantage of the topography, the views, which are beautiful from there. And then, do you want to put And in this one, we've added in the concept oh, that's better. Thank you.
Wire needs to go start talking to. Sorry about that.
We've added in the idea of an orchard. And the zone where we're showing that is what's been identified as farmland soils. It's also on a south-facing slope, and it would kind of go up to a high point. It's one of the higher points on the site with beautiful views from up there. So that would be a site for agritourism where people could come with their families to do apple picking, or if it's a berry patch, to take advantage of that, and then take advantage of the restaurant that's there and have the kind of synergy of programming between the restaurant, the inn, the event space, and the orchard in that area of the site. One thing I neglected to mention earlier is that in some of these, we are showing a little red box by the pond. That's a suggestion of a nature center, which would be mostly a shade structure, possibly completely outdoor classroom, but could be a sort of unconditioned room that could be used for learning. It could be a gathering space for the Boy Scout troop, for the if you had the fishing derby down at the pond. So that we're envisioning to be an extremely modest, kind of off-the-grid structure that could be incorporated in any of these options. Another thing to note is that in each of these schemes, we're showing one path that's kind of a widened path. That's something that's intended for vehicular access, emergency access, a kind of public safety opportunity to be able to traverse the site if needed. And then we've created a kind of a hierarchy of paths where some of the cart paths have been removed since it's not necessary to maintain all of those going forward. And those that are maintained would be maintained with intentionality to be accessible. Some paved, some might be gravel, but they would allow safe access to a greater amount of the site going forward for the public. Moving to alternative C1A. Here, again, we're showing a greater density of housing than we showed previously, testing all of the potential options within those zones that we identified earlier. So this one shows a larger amount of the duplex and triplex units at the Woodfield Road location. And so the active recreation zone moves up to the corner, the northwest corner of the site. So in this case, we are showing that duplex and triplex housing on the south side with the one multifamily building, which I described earlier. On the northwest corner, this one tests having an indoor recreation facility, which is something that was identified by the Parks Department as an interest, along with some of the public. And that's adjacent to a town pool, pickleball courts, basketball, and tennis. And then along Ansonia, always sort of holding to the south of the existing tree line, screened from view from Ansonia Road, we have the proposed senior kind of cluster housing, which extends a little bit deeper into the site in this proposal. Alternative C1B is just like the one I just described, but looking at the housing along Ansonia actually coming deeper into the site in order to completely bypass the sort of more dense area of existing trees, which Mike is pointing to now. And so it's the same amount of housing units, but just pulled further to the south within the site. Alternative C2. So this begins to look at a zone of development, which we have been calling the connector piece. It takes the Woodfield Road site and connects it to the Ansonia Road site. It's something that we studied because it might make the site more of one continuous kind of developed and occupied zone where residents could move from one part of the site to the other. It creates one developable parcel for purposes of creating a development opportunity. And it just gives you a chance to see what a denser amount of housing might look like on this site. Even this proposal includes 100 acres of natural green space. It also includes a test pit for an ice rink complex on the northwest corner rather than a field or a rec center area. So here we're showing a hockey rink size field, size rink. To the south of that, an outdoor recreation rink. These could be connected. And then the red represents support buildings, which could include a cafe and multi-purpose rooms within it. Alternative C3, very similar to what you just saw, but on the Woodfield Road side, we brought back the idea of having some hospitality uses at Woodfield Road. And here we're showing those at the southern end of the site, the same uses that we've tested previously, where we would have a restaurant and some outbuildings that could be a spa or event space. And also here, we've returned to the idea of the orchard, again, thinking about that synergy between the hospitality use, the adjacent housing, and the agro-tourism opportunity there. And lastly, alternative C4. All of these are on the boards in the back, so you will have time to take a look at them and kind of dive into them, and we're here to answer questions. But this pulls back a little bit from the amount of housing that was shown in the previous two. It goes back to having discrete areas of housing, senior housing on the Ansonia Road side, and then a multifamily and some duplex and triplex housing along Woodfield Road. It keeps the hospitality uses on Woodfield Road, and it shows an active recreation zone up on the northwest corner. And these are, again, kind of areas that are identified where you could have an indoor rec facility if the town feels that that's something that's needed on this site. You could just have an athletic field. You could have tennis courts and pickleball courts and a mix of those types of hard court uses. But the area is identified on the plan, and in this case, in the northwest corner. So as you're looking at these, you might say, well, I don't see any need for a rec center, but I'd love to have just a field there where my grandkids could play. So that would still kind of fit into this option where that corner is identified for active recreation. And those are that's the sum total of all of the options that have been explored. We're going to move to our next step in this process, but Mika would like to say a couple of words before then.
Thank you, Betsy. I just wanted to reiterate what Mike had said in the beginning. I know it's difficult. There's a small screen here. The technology is not exactly what we would like it to be, but it is all going to be on the website, on our website, so you will have it there. In addition to the information, it has virtually all the information that's been available recently with regards to this project on the website. And you'll see the CCW icon on there, so you'll be able to click on there and get to where you want to go. Additionally, on our COOPOP site, we have some information that COOPOP has researched in regard to this property in terms of our acquiring it. So for additional information on that, you can go to our COOPOP site and you should see information related to the CCW, the Country Club of Woodbridge, on there as well. So. And then I know that there's a survey coming up, and there's more opportunity to see what you've seen here in a little bit more detail, and I think that might be helpful. And again, thanks for the great turnout, folks. Thank you very much for coming.